Herman Gilliam, or Herman Lee, if you want the whole thing, Gilliam. Age 83, born December 22nd, 1931. Christian County, Kentucky. Was born at home, obviously. In those days. Lived in a corner of the county, about 13 family across from the forks of a river, Red River. We didn't get some of the county benefits, such as a better gravel road and so forth, for a while. My dad gave the gravel to roll out our portion of it. But I went to school in Todd County mostly. However, I started my wonderful education in a one-room school known as Lunderman School. And we had about a total of 18 in that school. And finally, with school buses coming along and so forth, we dissolved the little school somewhat to Pembroke schools, and I went to Trenton schools over in another county, simply to get away from not having to cross this big creek. We call it a creek half the time, or river half the time. Had two swinging bridges there to go our farm. The farm was cut in 3 pieces by this big creek. Had plenty of good swimming holes over your head. And clean water and so forth. Of course, we were like so many others. We learned how to garden. We learned how to herd the cattle. I had a few mules step on my foot when I was barefooted. Been thrown from my horse one time, pulled off another time or two.
I've had that happen.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about like maybe the schools? Did you go to college? Were you enlisted? Were you drafted?
I didn't go
What were
to
you
college
doing?
immediately out of high school. I went on and had a year of construction all out of high school. Well, a year more, almost 2 years, I guess. Anyway, I went back to college while I was on active duty in the Air Force. I went to college, started college. I never had any college education at that time. And I was there at Camel Air Base in Kentucky, right next to Fort Campbell. Had a small base, 300 guys. Big runway for hauling in atomic warheads and all out of that area. The atomic area, that storage and all, was known as the bird cage. We wasn't supposed to tell about what was going on there, but you could pick up the county paper, or the main paper in the county, and they would explain what's going on down there.
That makes sense. Can you tell me about the bird cage? Like, what was that? Are you allowed to talk about it? What was the bird cage? What is that? The bird cage you just mentioned?
The bird cage was, we had Army and Marines and some Air Force station and storage of warheads, atomic warheads. And, well, anyway, that's where I was. And I went to college, pursuing pre-dental, and I didn't make it. I had almost 3 years of college and dropped out because my grades were just so-so, plus money was a factor too. And I got into hearing work, and that's how I stayed in that for 38 years.
What made you decide to enlist?
To enlist?
Mm-hmm.
It was my time to go. I was going to be drafted, and I decided to enlist. I was working on construction at Fort Campbell, and I saw the boys over the fence had jobs to do, Air Force guys, and I said, hey, I want the Air Force, I believe. I don't want to carry M1, I like guns, but there's another element there.
If you were going to be drafted, you might as well enlist, right?
Yeah.
So you enlisted
I was
into
getting
the Air
close
Force.
to be drafted. I'd already been examined and all.
You knew it was coming.
I didn't really dread it all that much at the time. I knew it was a fact of life. I certainly want to do what, I didn't want to hide. I've seen some more that didn't register for the draft and so forth. And it was an unpopular war. My brother was in a year ahead of me, a year and a half, 2 years ahead of me, really. He had Army, and he had it pretty rough in Korea. We was 5 years different age, and we were very close, so he would tell me what was happening in Korea. He'd write me occasionally, and I'd write him.
So you had kind of had some knowledge of Korea prior to going already?
Some knowledge of the hellhole.
Did you really kind of know where it was?
Huh?
Did you know where Korea was?
Sure.
You did?
I didn't know till I heard about Korea, and then I looked it up on the globe and all.
Mm-hmm. So where did you have your basic training at?
Lackland Air Base in San Antonio.
Yeah, all right.
I was the second man to ship out. I asked to be a mechanic. My brother had a business, and I'd been a mechanic, some in his business, plus an old farm boy and new maintenance and all that. Anyway, they gave me a bypass test, and I didn't have to go to the, I won't call it Mickey Mouse school, but anyway, the introductory school to maintenance. You don't learn much. So they sent me to Reese Air Base, immediately out of basic, and missed that little school, and went out there for almost a year, and then signed to the Far East. Late October of 52.
Late October 52, huh?
Yeah, I got orders to go to Far East, and which could have been some of the islands, or Japan, or Korea.
Didn't really know.
And I was married at that time, and my wife we found out we was expecting a little one in October, I guess it was. Anyway, I was glad to go to Korea because the quicker time element, come on back, to be in Japan 18 months, I believe is given then. In Korea, you give them 1 year. Those old boys of World War II, they were gone for the duration. I had a lot of respect for those. Those guys went through the big depression. They went through some hard, tough times. And some of them are still around, maybe tech sergeant, master sergeant. They had been in World War II when I went in. But I've heard one of them say, spend the last money you had for a bowl of chili, and then take a bottle of ketchup and put in there simply for more food value. That was America. Well, anyway, you want to know about me. Like I said,
That I do.
I went to the one-room schoolhouse. I had occasion to go back to Kentucky. I go back every year or two anyway, but I met my old school teacher. I'd kept in phone contact the last 10 years of her life. Mm-hmm. And she remembered all of her family and all, but she's getting a bit seedy. And I waited 1 year too long to go back to really her to enjoy me being there and me enjoy her. But, and let's see, because of the big creek I was on, as I say, then I went to school in another county, small school. We'd play basketball, and we'd have maybe 15 to play, make up 2 teams and substitutes. I was one of the bigger boys. Oh boy. Wasn't all that much of a star athlete either.
Neither was I. So whenever you were enlisted and you were deployed to Korea, where did you land, or where did you fight in Korea?
Do I what?
Where did you land in Korea whenever you
I landed first day of January of '53. I flew from Japan to Seoul, Korea, and I got there on New Year's Day, and as I said earlier, kidding, I think that's the highest I ever was at New Year's Eve, flying to Japan. I'd gotten Japan on Christmas Day, 1952. I turned 21 years old out in the middle of the Pacific on December 22nd, 1952. First wedding anniversary was in Japan. My wife was 8,000 miles away. Back to New Year's Day of 1953. We landed, and then I was stuck in Seoul for 5 hours, 7 hours to just catch any kind of flight I could to go to K-13 down to Suwon. By road, it was like 35, 40 miles. It was 11 minutes in the air from the time it took up to down in the little old C-47, I think we was flying then. Of interest, here I was in a combat zone in Seoul. I wasn't issued any silverware yet, just in transit. So New Year's Day, we had a turkey dinner and no silverware for me to eat with, so I used my pocket knife and crackers and enjoyed the turkey dinner.
You do what you gotta do.
And then I got to Suwon. I was assigned to ground power, which was just in support of aircraft with repairing heaters, air compressors, power units, and the power units out on the Yellow Sea, on National Bomb Range. They practiced bombing out there, and I'd go out, meal with the other mechanics, and go out there once a month, check the power units, keep everything going that way. I was interested in going out across the rice paddies. And in the process of crossing the rice paddies, you go out there one day, the next time you come back 3 or 4 weeks later, and they've been plowed up, and you have to just go your own way. But I would eat out there sometime, and the food out there, sea rations, doctored up with the Korean cooks, was better food than we had back at the main base. Mm-hmm. That sounds crazy now, but it actually tastes better than what we had junk. Of course, I had a lower rank. All I had was 2 stripes and went over and made the 3rd one, but we still ate in a very poor quality chow. The first 3 graders had a better system, of course, the officers and all that.
How are the other living conditions? How are like your clothes, and how much were you getting paid? How was sleeping arrangements?
I don't know what I was getting paid now. It seemed like, I don't know, $96 a month, something like that. And then I got McIrvin first class, and we got a bigger quarters allowance. Went from $40 to $60, I believe, and that was sent home. Of course, I arranged to have an extra allotment sent home to my wife and so forth. But the pay was nothing to brag about, considered now. We had a PX over there. He had a few things, not much. I didn't need to watch it. I was a Seoul PX one time going through there. Later on, I bought a watch that I still have, and it still works. You have to wind it, you know. But it's still a good watch. That's amazing. Just another off-brand watch. But I'd gone up there looking for a brother-in-law of mine that tried to get in touch with me, and he was on the way for an R&R in Japan. He came back to my area there. Anyway, I couldn't find him up in Seoul because by the time I got there, he'd already gone to Japan and so forth. That's the reason I was in Seoul. I was in Seoul 3 or 4 times going through.
What was your reaction to whenever you found out about the Korean War, like the outbreak?
Well, I was an old farm boy, and I was working. I came to the house about 10:30 in the morning. I heard that we were in war or so forth. I wasn't surprised at anything. My dad had been in World War I. We just got through World War II, and my dad always had a saying, says, talking about over there when he was in Germany and all, World War I, says, we came on fiddling and dancing, so they got ready for another war over there. Well, this kind of was in my mind, thinking we'll have wars, and wars, as the Bible says, until the end of time, war, rumors of war. So that's how I felt. It didn't surprise me. And then we began to listen to the news and read the newspaper and so forth that related to the war. But like you asked, did I know where Korea was? No, I didn't know where Korea was until I looked it up. The globe. In my aptitude, I'm mechanically inclined. I'm not much of an administrative person. Last night at 11 o'clock, I was still trying to get started on putting my income tax together. I was good on the equipment and so forth, and good in mathematics. And I would still ride down the road and figure percentages in my head. Just, to keep active. I was in hearing work for, like say, 38 years, and we did some time payments. And I'd sit down and figure them up real quick on paper, talking to someone what he wanted to buy, a hearing instrument and so forth. And then I decided, well, I'll use a calculator after 30 years of that maybe. And I started using a calculator, and I depended on keep my brain alive. And by George, I got a little more dull mathematically. So I said, the heck with this. I started back using the old brain and my pencil and paper. Just a thought, I'm sure. Good to keep active. Am I leading to I don't know what you
No, you're doing fine. Now, did you exchange any letters with family or friends while you were fighting in Korea?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, back to your wife mainly.
Wife and family, no, yeah.
Did you build up any close relationships with other foreign troops, including Korean soldiers?
Yeah, go back to Korea, Eddie.
Did you build up any relationships with other troops or foreign troops?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Good buddy. We worked together, and he and I could make something work for what we had to do with. Mm-hmm. Dwayne Olson, little town of Shawano, Wisconsin. And we called and talked to each other 4 or 5 times a year. Mm-hmm. He called me about 3 weeks ago. I almost got killed in a car wreck. Anyway, he and I were sitting on the runway. We'd heard the siren go off, and we knew it was going to be a crash at K-13. Mm-hmm. The plane came in, Marine Panther jet, the type takeoff aircraft carrier, came in, went down the runway zigzagging like this, no hydraulics to lower the landing gear and all. And then he, being a camera buff, the next day after he went and took a picture of the plane. And he and I both were back taking more pictures, I believe we had happened. And this Marine officer came up, and we got to talking, and it was Ted Williams that crashed the plane, the baseball player. So that's not the end of the story. Then they put the plane over on an oil barrel, 55-gallon oil drums, and worked on it and all that. And then it got going pretty good, pretty quick. Within 5 or 6 days, cranked it up. Here it is. Got a big thrust. Nothing behind to catch your ballast. They forgot to look, but it's a plywood building over the dispensary, made out of the cheap plywood we had. A darn thing blowed the roof off of that building.
Oh my gosh.
11 o'clock in the morning, I heard medics running up. Yeah!
So that was definitely
So anyway, his pictures that he took, some of those are at Ted Williams Museum.
And where's that at?
Huh?
Where's that at?
I believe it's in Florida. I can't recall right off.
Yeah.
Maybe around Tampa. I don't remember. Of course, Ted Williams died, 8 or 9 years ago at age 82 or 3 or something like that.
So that was definitely a memory. Do you have any other really memorable moments, whether they were good or bad or dangerous or during your duty? or
No,
difficult?
I fell and hurt this foot, and I fell and stuck a rod in here once. It just, but that's, nothing. And it's enlisting. I re-enlisted once, and I was going to make a career, and I changed my mind. And then I went further. I'd already started back in college anyway, but anyway, then I got changed my FSC to special services, and I ran the auto hobby shop for the boys on the base. Teach them how to repair their cars and do various things that way. The base I was on, finally after I re-enlisted, was right near my home, where I grew up.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what your job was, what your duty was while you were in Korea?
Okay, I was ground power. My AFSC was automotive repair, and I was fortunate to get in ground power because it was a better deal, and all. I worked on so much odd stuff. As I said before, I didn't go to the basic mechanical school. I didn't work in the automotive aircraft automotive repair, even though that was my FSC. I didn't work in that until, I'd have to figure it out, 3 years. I was in vehicle inspection a lot and several bases and all that. So then I got to Florida, December of '53, right at Christmas. And I stayed there until I was discharged in October of '55. And down there they finally put me in charge of one of the shops. And again, I hadn't worked as a automotive mechanic. And it was only one thing I didn't know how to do. And I set the backlash of the rear end, how much clearance you need per vehicle. And I said to one government employee, civilian government employee, Mr. Marshall, I see you're setting up rear end, backlash and all. I said, that's the only thing I don't know how to do. I've never done it. And I'd worked for my brother too in civilian life before. And I said, show me how to do it. He showed me how to do it. I didn't want anybody to know, that time I had 4 stripes, I didn't want anybody to know that I didn't know something that I should do. I always took the job pretty serious. Had some older guys, a few years older than me, they were staff sergeant. I chose me. My mother got sick, I had to go have surgery, so I went home to see her. I was hoping he'd give somebody else a shot, because I couldn't make another stripe off, and I didn't want the responsibility. So anyway, I stayed on to Florida and was discharged there in October 15 of 1955. Immediately went on to Kentucky, re-enlisted in that little Camel Air Base. This since been, I think, in no Air Force there anymore. No, it doesn't exist. The base doesn't exist. Runway obviously is still there. No, a big runway to handle any kind of plane, pretty much.
What was the impact that Korea had on your life after you returned home?
Would it have impact?
Yeah, was there an impact on your life? Did it affect you at all?
I had been living in that community where I was discharged from finally, after 6 years, 10 months, 15 days of military time. And it wasn't that big a change. I started back to college full time then, going to Austin Peace College over in Clarksville, Tennessee. This is the same. My grade wasn't quite up to par really, and I knew it'd be hard to get in dental school, so I dropped out and got into hearing work. Any problems with just getting back in the swing of things? Not really. I was in my community and, bought a house. I bought a house before I got out of the Air Force that way. Immediately when I was re-enlisted there, I bought a house in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and we lived there until we moved into Texas. I guess what I got, as I said earlier, I put on the paper, self-reliance, take care of yourself. Do I keep moving?
No, fine.
Anyway, I prided myself on that, and honor your word. Heard a politician say about Mitch McConnell, the old Kentucky Speaker of the House, I believe it is. And somebody, one of them said to the other on TV, said, well, he said so-and-so said, will he honor that? He said, yeah. He said, he's one of those old Kentucky boys. He'll honor his word. My dad always taught me this. Honor your word. Let your word be your bond. I try to live up to that. And if somebody does to me, it gets to me pretty quick. Anyway, you got one or two good ancestors. Hang on to those.
Well, have you been back to Korea at all?
No.
No? Do you have any interest in seeing how it's developed and it's changed?
No, we will probably take another trip to Washington, D.C. this year. I've been there 4 or 5 times now, various things, various groups in my own.
Are you going with the KWVA?
Huh?
Are you going with the KWVA? The Veterans Association?
Oh, I've been to all of those alignments and all, yeah.
Are you going with them to Washington, D.C.?
I don't know. No, I won't. I don't like to be Richmond. I like to be free to go where I want to when I get there.
Yeah.
And me and my wife and my son and his wife will probably go this year. We were thinking about going back to England and Scotland. That's too far for me.
Yeah.
I get tired. I want to sit down occasionally, you know. Anyway, the question you asked that I got away from, what was it now?
Just have you been back to Korea, or do you have
Korea.
any interest in going back
I
to
really
see?
don't care to go back. I don't want to be there and someone's going to take me to see all these wonderful things. I'd want to go back where I've been. I could sit on my computer and pull up at our base on global Earth, and there's miles and miles of progress, a runway that's 3 times wider, 2 runways, you know, and all that. I don't resent anything of being there, but I wouldn't enjoy someone, you know, not going to where I want to go.
Yeah, it's understandable. So back in 2013, we witnessed the 60th anniversary of the armistice, which was signed by China, North Korea, and the UN on July 27th. There's no war in modern history that lasted 60 years after an official ceasefire. What do you think that we have to do to put a closure on it? Or do you support a kind of movement to petition to the end of war officially and to replace the armistice with a peace treaty?
If I understand your question, number one, well, we'll go to the latter part of it. I don't think we'll ever have the Korean War declared as a war that's over. I mean, we've gone and said, hey, let's quit fighting. We learned something. We learned that America got involved in a war they couldn't win and didn't win in some ways, and in other ways, yes, we won. We stopped the communists. We gave a nation economic security. I remember being in the World's Fair in 1966, I believe it was, and I saw the booth that the Korean War, South Korea had, and I saw, boy, gee, they're manufacturing. You know, I could see the manufacturing, not just read about it. I just don't. They're great power, and I hope we keep going with them, and they're great people, and they went through so much of that war, gave so much. I still have in my mind such sights as seeing a kid walking down the street of Suwon with a dried fish on a string. That was going to be his meal. The South Koreans were faring better when we were there in wartime than they didn't want us to leave. The short-minded thought. When we began to talk strongly about truce in spring and summer of 1953, we would have incidents at the end of the runway. Our fighter jets going out would have 30 caliber holes in them. Who was doing that? The South Koreans was doing that to keep us thinking, keep us there in that war. We had air police on the main gate shot. I don't know how many was killed, but it went through a period of time. Every week, an air policeman on a guard on the main gate would be shot, create an image instance, because the South Korean, again, did not want us to leave them there. They had blankets they got from us. You can imagine a war zone. They take anything that we threw away
Right.
and make something out of it.
So were the South Koreans shot some of your airmen?
When then what?
Did you say that the South Koreans shot your airmen, other airmen that you were stationed with?
The guards on the gate.
Wow.
I know it sounds so foreign,
Mm-hmm.
but here was people so desperate that they didn't want the war to be over, because we would leave and the many items that they got, and we would bring a load of them in each day to work at the base. I mean, this is a low boy, 40-foot low boy. They would come in standing up on that with a cable around it so that it wouldn't fall off. One load of 40, I don't know how many times it came with a load. We had one to work in our shop. I've seen it, the physical system was so malnourished. We'd bring him food from the chow hall. He would take plain old dried bread, or well, plain old bread, and the equivalent of 4 or 5 slices, just cram it in his mouth, and he'd say, "Number 1 chop," you know. And we'd give him stuff and give him clothes. Give him our clothes. He would take them out and get them washed for a little of nothing and bring them back. You know how they would wash those clothes? Get by a little stream, use that water, any stream anyway, get water.
Mm-hmm.
Lay the clothes on a rock and beat them on with a piece of wood or something. That was their washing.
I couldn't imagine having to do that today, especially. I've been spoiled.
Yeah.
What do you think that the legacy of the Korean War veterans and the Korean War would be? Like, what do you think that needs to be passed down for younger generations to understand? Is it important for them to know what sacrifices were made in Korea?
I think it was odd that we started out, it was a forgotten war, and that's what it kind of turned into being.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we helped get a nation economically fixed to stop communism there, and that. I guess I commented outside in the hallway a moment ago, one of my other Korean buddies there.
Mm-hmm.
We're being forgotten. It's time to pass on, and the Vietnam and the Afghanistan and the so forth are being noticed more, because there's a lot of old guys like me, you know, they just going in the sunset.
Well, that's what we're doing here. We don't want you guys to be forgotten, and it's important for your legacy to be heard. It's important to know.
Not really forgotten, but not paramount as we think of veterans.
I mean, we believe, and I mean, that you guys deserve just the same amount of recognition and appreciation.
I can appreciate some guys here who gave a whole lot bigger sacrifice than I did. I was just gone a while and all, and no food, not much food, clothing, shelter. My first night in Korea, I was in a Quonset. That's what I stayed in most of the time there anyway, but the door was frozen, half open, half closed. But to try and, I know history will be, I don't say kind to us. Yeah, we participated, we performed, we did what we had to do. And it's amazing, though, we've gotten to the trend. We don't win wars.